Okay, we're kind of in a confusing situation right now because it's very confusing. Like, it makes, to be honest with you, when I learned that Jesus became, when he left us and he became pure existence, which means he's the universe itself, I figured he would never be in a position where his life could be in danger. So I was really shocked to learn recently that it's possible that Jesus could be, that he's put himself in a position where he could be permanently exterminated again. And I've been trying to work this out. And I want to share with you what I have worked out, okay? I'm wearing an old shirt that somebody got me when I was the president. I like it because the shirt's comfortable. But I am not the president. My husband, Brent, is the president. When Jesus was in a coma, when Satan beat him up and put him in a coma because Satan claimed that Jesus had violated some sort of non-interference agreement because I made Jesus co-president. And then Satan said that strengthened his powers. And it weakened Jesus, and then Satan was able to beat Jesus up and put him into a coma. And if my Brent did not don the risky Gail suit and go in there and chase Satan away, we would not have Jesus. Brent saved his life. And then Brent encouraged me to make a YouTube video to ask for help because Jesus was in a coma. To resuscitate Jesus. And about, I'd say a couple days after I made the video, Jesus' God friends showed up. Buddha, Lakshmi, Horus, Triton, and Muhammad. And Buddha started teaching us how to meditate, stating that this would resuscitate Jesus' chakras and help to bring him back to life. Yeah. Because apparently Satan had beat him up to the point where his chakras had gone down to about 3 dimensions or less. I think it was about 3 dimensions. Buddha said that's very dangerous for a deity because deities are 11-dimensional. And he said this would build up his chakras. Now, I didn't understand why meditation would work. And so for that reason, I was doing it all wrong at the beginning. And Baphomet was having fun with that. I thought meditation, I didn't know anything about meditation, so I'd go sit by my window, and I thought I was getting messages from on high that Jesus had revived again, and then Buddha had to show up and say, no, Gail, meditation isn't about getting messages. He said it's about living joyfully in the moment, being in the present, and being thankful. And he said, what you have been doing is not correct meditation. In fact, by listening to those messages that you got during meditation, you actually weakened Jesus. So he said a really good way to meditate is to go out and explore new places. There was a tea place near me, so I went to, and he said that really strengthened Jesus when I started doing that. I had just moved here. And I didn't understand it, but I thought whatever would resuscitate Jesus, I was willing to do it. He was in a coma, okay? And he was almost dead. Finally, I got the hang enough. And the reason it was so important for me to do the meditation right is because my Gail shield is an extension of Jesus. So when I do those things that would weaken Jesus, see, Jesus is God's son, which means he's strong when he does those things that honor his Father, okay, that honor righteousness and the good forces in the multiverse. So whenever I do anything that feeds the evil forces, he gets weak. So I didn't understand it, but yeah. Now, almost 4.5 years later, I've kind of figured out why meditation works. And because we could end up in a similar situation, I figured that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Yes. I kind of understand the mistakes that I made, which led to Jesus being permanently exterminated. I was living in fear and doubt. And so was Jesus. Okay? Meditation works because it helps us to get out of the fear and doubt mentality and into the thankfulness, living joyfully in the moment mentality. And there are many ways that people can do proper meditation. What works for one person may not work for another. Your end goal in meditation is to resolve your fear and doubt, maintain an attitude of thankfulness, peace, and joy. If you have done that, then you have done proper meditation. So I want to explain to you, and I'm going to go ahead and switch over to audio format. I'm going to explain to you why meditation works, and I'm hoping that if I can get everybody to meditate properly, kind of like how I described it. So basically, whatever causes you, I do believe that we did build tea houses all over the world. So I would encourage everyone to go visit them and meditate to keep Jesus very, very strong. And Brent, my husband, recommended, now that we have this imminent danger for Jesus. Yeah, I've been trying to figure out why and how okay. I became Antichrist in August 2024 because God the Father told Jesus that, I'm not Jesus, that's brain control, told Satan that he was allowed to choose any human he wanted for his Antichrist, and he chose me. And God the Father told Satan that was an excellent choice, according to Satan. Probably correct, simply because God is not crazy about me as being the most righteous, free lover. For reasons I've already explained, God has pretty much given up on free love as a righteous possibility. And I have empathy for his position. I have empathy for his position, which I've already explained, because the marriage of free love and righteousness is exceedingly difficult, okay? Exceedingly difficult, which I explained in yesterday's video. However, it's not impossible. I believe, so basically, God probably felt that if I, the most righteous, free love human who was largely responsible for Jesus almost being permanently exterminated, okay, if I'm eliminated out of the picture, then Jesus would not have the danger of almost losing his eternal life again. So, I thought that danger was over since Jesus left us and became pure existence. Jesus must really want his free love utopia really, really badly, that he moved out of his father's house, because that's what happened when he went to his higher form, becoming fully equal to his dad. He moved out of his father's house into his own house, and he said he couldn't come back to this planet anymore. And I believe the reason for that is because he can no longer, if Jesus stayed, okay, and he tried to be the deity ruler for earth like he was planning in his canceled Bible, what would happen is everybody on earth would be looking to him as an example. Unfortunately, they would all know about the sex he had with me, okay, which was sinful. And then they would, as happens to humans, they would make an idol out of Jesus, and rather than be inspired by the righteousness they see in him, they would see the weakness in him and use that as an excuse to excuse their own evils. That's what always happens with the sin of idolatry. That's why God the Father said, it's over for free love, Jesus. You blew it yourself, and, So I was kind of puzzled why Jesus wanted me to do. Anyways, he cannot come back unless he sets up this earth Old Testament style and condemns free love. That means all forms of loving outside of monogamy would be considered sinful. Apparently, God the Father thinks that is the only type of sexual practice that can be done in righteousness. That any other type, the humans will botch it, or beings will botch it. Yeah, it's either monogamy or chastity, but no homosexuality, no polyamory, none of that stuff, okay? Not to God. Satan has called God a prick, okay? So I've been trying to work all this out. So this is going to be a rather long video. But I think something that will really help Jesus out right now is if we all properly meditate. So when I'm done making this video, the bus doesn't run today, I'm probably going to go on a long walk to go meditate. I'm hoping that if God the Father can see the good effect that I, as the most righteous, free love human, and unfortunately I may still have my Antichrist powers, I don't know. And that's another thing that puzzles me. Why is it that I understand why I'm Antichrist, because God has given up on free love, and he considers me the most righteous, free love human. Hopeless is a possibility for a righteous example. Okay? And yeah. So, when God looks at me, he sees a mistake that Jesus made in creating me. That's why he thinks I'd make a great Antichrist. I was apparently created to be a righteous example for free love, which God thinks is impossible. And that's why God thinks I'd make a great Antichrist. When Jesus left us in June 2022, that's when Jesus opened up his last meeting with us, telling us that, Gail, if I didn't intervene for you, my father would have permanently exterminated you when you called him dumb and stupid after he just corrected me. That only lasted for about 24 hours because Jesus told me that my father said I was acting like Job. And he said, that isn't the truth, Gail. Actually, I just said that to get you to, to get me to calm down because I was insulted for Jesus. I felt like God was being a prick. Basically, I had the same reaction that Satan does. So yeah, God would, yeah. So yeah. See, when God looks at me, he sees Satan as he was before he fell. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. But what was so funny is, so Zach asked Jesus in our last meeting with him, so is Gail still your favorite human? And Jesus answered, of course. And I was shocked. I thought, well, I guess you think more highly of me than your dad does. And then Jesus said, it's time for me to go now. And then he left with the song Free Bird. Okay, I've been having to wrap my fingers around this, trying to figure this all out. Like, what is going on here? Why can't Jesus stay with us? I've got it all figured out now. And I want to share my insights with you. Hopefully, like I said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If we can prevent Jesus from being permanently exterminated or getting near that position, that would be a lot better than having to deal with him in a coma again, or really. So I guess, and then another big question I had is, why is it that if I have a super strong orgasm, it could especially a sinful one apparently, it could possibly kill Jesus? And what would be considered a sinful orgasm? Because an orgasm in and of itself is not sinful, right? And I have noticed that my intelligence seems to be increasing, and Jesus did tell me that a human cannot go above 10,000 in IQ. So apparently I am headed towards deity. The other big question is, why is this happening and who's doing it? It's obviously not God the Father. So apparently, I don't think God wants me to be a deity. So apparently, Jesus, when he became fully equal to his Father, now has the ability to create deity. So it's apparently Jesus who's doing it. So here's what I think is going on. The reason Jesus left us And then he said he left Brent in his place, which was mind-boggling. I think it was mind-boggling to Brent too. So I've had a lot of time to think about this. Okay, so apparently Jesus has the ability to create deities now. And apparently, I think this has been done before. I think the goddess Sol used to be human and she became a deity. Though at that time, I think God did it. Because Jesus did tell us that he was unable to create deities. I think that changed when he went into meditation with Buddha and became fully equal to his dad for the first time in June 2022. So he saw another way forward for his free love utopia. And he left us with the song Free Bird, which says, I can't change, I can't change. So what I think is going on is Jesus has concluded that he is a free bird. That means he's a free love proponent, like his best God friend, Buddha, who is the God of free love. God, understandably, having had a bad experience with free lover Satan, who used to be an outstanding angel, has concluded that free love and righteousness can never coexist. Apparently, Jesus is taking a big chance in making me and Brent deities. That's a tall order, okay? In his place. Yeah. Jesus. So, and he apparently knew that in doing so, that Satan would make me the Antichrist. So this combination of me being a possible deity and also being the Antichrist is why Jesus' life is in jeopardy, right? Possible jeopardy right now. Let me tell you why. Like Zach Knight and Laurie McBride and Angelina Ballerina were past Antichrist, but I do not believe when they became Antichrist that alternate universes were made highlighting each of their sins, okay? I believe that happens to all. Okay, here's what I think happens when a human becomes a deity candidate. I believe when a human becomes a deity candidate, that it's the laws of the multiverse that immediately anything in their past that could make them a bad deity. How do I put this? Okay, deities are all 11-dimensional, okay? So whenever any human becomes a deity candidate, when they start advancing in that direction, then alternate universes are created around their spiritual practices. Because deities all have a spiritual practice, okay? Unfortunately for me, some of my spiritual practices have been evil. Yeah, and already alternate universes have been created around them. And this is going to be true of any spiritual practice we've had our entire life, even in our childhood. So, it's kind of like, is Jesus insane trying to make me a deity? Jesus apparently has faith that Brent and I will overcome that our previous spiritual practices, like Brent used to be agnostic, okay? So there's probably since he, I believe, is also a deity candidate, there is probably a universe out there that is an agnostic universe. Yeah. You say, well, why isn't that coming here? It's because Brent's not the Antichrist, okay? Okay, so here's how this difficult marriage of being Antichrist and deity works, I think. Because I'm also Antichrist, thanks to Satan, and because God is allowing Satan to make anybody Antichrist that he wants, that means as I advance to deity, as these alternate universes are created, because I am advancing to deity, there is an Antichrist version of me in each of those universes. If Satan can get all of those Antichrists to come here to this universe, which right now I believe is the only one that has any free love righteousness in it, Satan feels he can get the cumulative power of all my past spiritual evil practices to overcome my righteous spiritual practices in this universe to transform me fully into an evil deity. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but that's why Jesus' life would be in danger. When I become fully 11-dimensional, also having this Gail shield, which is an extension of Jesus' body, and if I am an 11-dimensional deity and I have this really strong orgasm, it would have the effect on Jesus like Rule 13 does when she explodes a man's penis. So he would explode and die. And this would probably be worse than a coma. Okay? It would be like instant death. Yeah. And I just find it puzzling that Jesus apparently knew this would happen and he allowed it. Because this is how badly he wants his free love utopia. Now, the big question I have is, why won't God stop this possible death of Jesus? Because he could if he wanted to. I believe the answer to that is that God does not want to thwart his son's free will. Okay? He still does not approve of the free love utopia that Jesus dreams of. So he will not thwart his son's free will, and even though he thinks Jesus is being foolish, he will not thwart his free will. So he'll even let Jesus kill himself if he has to. But I do not believe God's going to lower his standards. However, if we can somehow convince God that free love, could possibly be practiced in righteousness, maybe, and this is a big maybe, we might get him to soften his stance a little bit and maybe do something to save Jesus. That is my hope. You say, well, how do we do this? Right now, I think we're in a position where Brent is going to be, I think Brent is working on something to try to prevent these Gail entities from coming here. Okay? So we can save Jesus. But there's another being who could save Jesus, and that is God. We got to make it that God wants to do this. The only way God's going to want to do this is going to be if he's convinced that free love could work. Right now, it's a long shot. But let me explain to you how and why meditation played a significant role in saving Jesus' life when he was in a coma. And I think if we all would meditate properly as Buddha taught us, and which I did properly most of the time, which played a role in Jesus getting resurrected from his coma, God may notice and decide to do something. And then he may not. I mean, he might decide to let those entities come here and for us to have a big battle with them. And who knows? Anyways, let me explain to you how and why. I'm going to go ahead and read my audio reading. And it includes a conversation I had with Jesus. And then when this is all over, I encourage everyone to go out and meditate properly. And the proper way to meditate is to get yourself to a state where you eliminate your fears and doubts. There are two root sins, pride and fear and doubt. Pride is the worse or deeper of the two, and it is very possible to have both. Those afflicted with the root sin of pride are always afflicted with the root sin of fear and doubt. Those afflicted with the root sin of fear and doubt may or may not be afflicted with the deeper root sin of pride, but the two are so close together that one very often leads to the other. A root sin is a sin which leads to every other sin or illness in the multiverse. All beings except God and Jesus are afflicted with each or both of these root sins, because only God and Jesus in their current states are infallible and have achieved perfection. Jesus, up until June 2022, had a very minor case of the root sin of fear and doubt. Because it was a minor case, he did have moments, even when he was not up to the infallible level of his Father, where he too was infallible like his Father. However, when Jesus allowed his root sin of fear and doubt to afflict him, he had an identity crisis. This identity crisis came about because Jesus had some minor doubts, the fear and the doubt, about his Father's goodness and fairness. This fear and doubt was probably operating at a subconscious level in Jesus because he feared his dad, so that Jesus wouldn't even acknowledge to himself that he suffered fear and doubt. Here are the manifestations of the root sin of fear and doubt, identity crisis: a tendency toward codependency in relationships, an overly strong need to belong to a group, which makes one feel acceptable, thus making one susceptible to the SJW lies and labels, the sin of idolatry, which makes you create an idol to lose yourself into, to feel acceptable. You see, because Jesus had a minor case of fear and doubt, he made an idol of the goddess Lakshmi. The sin of idolatry manifests itself as a need to make an idol to lose oneself into, to excuse your failings, and to feel adequate because you feel unjustly inferior. You fear God, who you feel has made you unjustly inferior, and so you have a need to lose yourself into an idol to feel better about yourself. This is a very dangerous sin for this reason. Once you lose yourself into your idol, you will justify anything and everything you do if you feel it honors your idol. You think anything that honors your idol has to be right. This can devolve to a confusing mess and to the point of insanity, because you truly do not understand your idol, that is, because you mainly have that idol to meet your need to feel better about yourself. Your idol has become all the things that you wish you were because you feel so inferior about something. Losing yourself into your idol, you will justify anything and everything to honor that idol, feeling this is ultimate righteousness. The end result: murder, unjust warfare, religious zeal, the sacrifice of your children, etc., and total insanity. Which is why I cooperated with Jesus when he was using me as a sex dummy, even though I wasn't enjoying it, because he was my idol. Okay, let's continue. Jesus showed this idolatrous insanity when he used Gail as a sex dummy in early 2022. He put a little bit of the goddess Lakshmi into Gail for this reason. Jesus has removed what little bit he put of Lakshmi into Gail in June 2022 once he found peace about being so much like his dad. Jesus knew that when he used Gail as a Lakshmi sex dummy, that it would weaken him to the point where Satan could possibly annihilate him. But his minor sin of idolatry made him go a little insane. You see, Jesus had some fear and doubt revolving around his dad. Gail picked up on this when God the Father corrected Jesus on Easter Sunday 2022, which made Gail feel anger towards God, feeling God was unfair and prudish in his dealings with Jesus. But until Jesus could overcome his fear and doubt in relation to his dad, he could not overcome his idolatry of the goddess Lakshmi, who Jesus felt was better than his dad. And so to Jesus, Lakshmi became the goddess of perfection that Jesus needed to lose himself into to feel better about himself. In fact, this is one of the reasons Jesus wanted to marry Lakshmi. In fact, he felt inferior sometimes because he could not be the monogamous husband that Lakshmi required. Yeah, she rejected him for marriage. The mere fact that Lakshmi rejected Jesus probably made him idolize her more. Whenever God corrected Jesus growing up, it made Jesus feel inferior, and it made him see his dad as overly strict and unreasonable at times. Jesus is a free bird, like Satan, in a sense, Both Jesus and Satan have this in common, and may be a large part of why they used to be BFF. Yeah, would you believe this? Jesus and Satan used to be BFF. Gail did pick up in early 2022, when God corrected Jesus for his adultery with her, that Jesus and Satan were both struggling with the same sin, fear and doubt, at the time. Gail encouraged Jesus to be a son that would make his dad proud, and sensed that Jesus had fear and doubt that needed resolving. Once Jesus' fears and doubts about his dad were resolved in June 2022, he attained full infallibility and lost his doubts about his dad, lost his need to make an idol of the goddess Lakshmi, though she and Jesus remain very good friends. I actually think she played a big role in him finding himself. Because I told Lakshmi, I know you're saving yourself for your god husband, but Jesus has a really beautiful heart, and he will, when he opens it up to you in meditation, it's really cool, Lakshmi. You should experience this with him. And I think she did. Anyways, let's go on. Jesus has decided that being so much like his dad is cool and no longer has issues with it. He has finally found peace about being so much like his dad, and no longer has a need to prove himself different and superior to his dad in some respects. So he has resolved his identity crisis. Here are the manifestations of the root sin of pride, which is a feeling of superiority which makes you feel entitled. War, righteous anger, murder, a need for power and control. Satan's root sin is pride, but he too is afflicted with fear and doubt. While it's possible to be primarily afflicted with the root sin of fear and doubt and not have a lot of the root sin of pride, the two very often go together. If the root sin of fear and doubt is not resolved, it can level up to the deeper root sin of pride, causing the being to manifest both root sins in their life. This is the case with Satan. Satan, unfortunately, used to be a very high-ranking angel and was God and Jesus' favorite angel. This has contributed to his pride. Until he feels utter humiliation for his failings and also resolves his fear and doubt about God, he won't get right. Satan and Jesus used to be BFF. Satan used to be God and Jesus' favorite angel. I suspect the BFF relationship may have revolved around the love that both Jesus and Satan have for free love, among other things. Before Satan fell, he, like Jesus, also believed in true love. But Satan committed a free love violation that caused God to punish him rather severely. Satan felt the punishment was overboard, not understanding that God can see things that he can't. Not responding correctly to God's correction of his free love violation, Satan began to feel fear and doubt, which quickly devolved to pride and anger. And Satan began acting out those fears and doubts and angers by raping his fellow beings. It got to the point that Satan was able to get a following by convincing his fellow angels that God was unfair. When God corrected Jesus on Easter Sunday 2022, and I became angry at God over this, God saw Satan in me, which is why God would have permanently exterminated me then if Jesus did not intervene. God also foresaw that if Jesus approved of me in this respect, it could lead to Jesus' death. I have apologized to God for my anger towards him. It was not right because I did not understand fully the repercussions of my attitude, nor did I fully understand Jesus at the time. Unfortunately, those afflicted with the root sin of pride will never get right until they're humbled. They have to feel the results of their root sin of pride in a manner that they feel totally humiliated and shamed. Until then, they will not get right. They also need to resolve their root sin of fear and doubt. Fear and doubt manifests itself in worry, anxiety, which stem from doubts about the goodness of God the Father. We worry because we doubt God's goodness and have fears. There are no fears when there are no doubts. Even death can be welcomed if there are no doubts. Those with no doubts see death as a transition, not a tragic end. Meditation, oh, by the way, reincarnation does exist. Buddha told us that. He said when a human dies, they can choose to be reincarnated, or they can choose to just die and go to heaven and live in their resurrection body. Let me continue. Meditation, practiced correctly, is a great antidote to the root sin of fear and doubt. That's why it works, folks. Unfortunately, if a being is strongly afflicted with the deeper root sin of pride, meditation alone will not fix them, or make them righteous, I should say. They will also need a good humiliation or spanking. Unfortunately, the pain and suffering which have come about because of the fall in the Garden of Eden have caused much confusion about these two root sins. We cannot look past our suffering and see the goodness of God because of all the suffering we feel. We become obsessed with our suffering. But we have to see past the suffering if we want to save ourselves. Meditation helps us to relax, see the goodness around us, and appreciate the beauties of God's creation and see His goodness all about us. The reason Jesus got right so quickly after his dad corrected him is because he had not devolved to the point that Satan had, in that Jesus had been a humble deity for most of his eternal life. Jesus' problem was some fear and doubt. Satan's problem is mostly pride. While it's true that those afflicted with pride are always afflicted with fear and doubt, it's possible to be afflicted with fear and doubt and not have an issue with pride. So really, pride is the true root sin. Fear and doubt is one of its prime manifestations, though. I would say pride is the true root sin. Fear and doubt is kind of like a weaker root sin. And those with fear and doubt usually go into self-righteous type of pride. Okay? Yeah, because they usually have a need to prove themselves. Anyways, let me get going. When this is the case, okay, those afflicted with pride are always afflicted with fear and doubt. It's possible to be afflicted with fear and doubt and not have an issue with pride. None of this is totally humble, okay? But it's possible to have a fear and doubt problem and not have a big pride problem. When this is the case, that humble being, when corrected by God, will get right rather quickly once they understand the nature of their mistake. This has been the case with both Jesus and Gail, myself. Satan, unfortunately, afflicted with the deeper and more stubborn root sin of pride, needs a very good spanking before he gets right. He also needs to understand that when God corrects him, it is fair, thus resolving his fear and doubt. Satan subconsciously sensed that Jesus, like himself, had fear and doubt around God the Father. Satan believed that the only reason Jesus stayed loyal to his dad was out of fear. So Satan saw Jesus as a cowardly hypocrite, unlike himself. This is why Satan felt justified to try to kill Jesus in March 2022, knowing Jesus had committed sins with Gail and committed other sins, similar sins to himself, but felt Jesus a cowardly hypocrite who wouldn't own the very same sins that Satan committed, that got Satan booted out of heaven. Gail suspects that when Jesus committed adultery with Gail and blocked her husband Brent's root chakra, that this violation was very similar to whatever sin Satan committed that got him booted out of heaven. Satan apparently thought he may have been in love with some forbidden being. I suspect it was a high-ranking being, and attempted to have a lust fest with him or her. God found out and split Satan in two and kicked Satan out of heaven eventually. Satan is furious, seeing other beings like Jesus, who commit similar sexual violations as himself and yet are allowed to remain in heaven. This is a large part of why Satan has such a following. Satan thinks God kicked him out solely because God is a prick. Unfortunately for Satan, Jesus kind of subconsciously felt his dad was a prick for most of his eternal life, which contributed to Jesus's identity crisis. I think Satan subconsciously picked up on this, which made him really mad, okay? Satan felt it so unfair that Jesus got special privileges for committing the same sins as himself just because Jesus was God's son. Jesus now sees the wisdom behind all of his dad's corrections and no longer feels his dad is a prick. Having found peace about being so much like his dad, Jesus has found himself and is now totally equal to his dad in all respects and in total peace about it. What Satan and his followers need to understand is that God didn't kick Satan out just for his sexual violations alone. God kicked Satan out for his pride. When God corrected Jesus for Jesus' free love violation, Jesus remained humble. Satan did not. Even though God and Jesus appear to disagree on the matter of free love, it's more a disagreement about the best way to resolve the cancer in the multiverse, which revolves around the root sins of pride and fear and doubt. God seems to be of the opinion that fear and doubt always lead to pride, because this appears to be how Satan fell. Jesus seems to feel that those afflicted with fear and doubt, if given the chance, and if they have enough inspiration and forgiveness, may not necessarily devolve to Satan's level of anger and pride if they have enough humility, which is the greatest virtue, to keep an open heart. To understand God's position, you have to understand that Satan, before he fell, was an angel gloriously beautiful inside and out. Satan was close to perfection in his beauty in all respects. Unfortunately for Satan, he was also doted upon for his beauty, and this has been his downfall. Jesus, on the other hand, suffered enough correction from his dad growing up. He was also polio abs growing up too, okay? That he has remained humble for the most part. I don't think Satan was ever polio abs. Jesus got a little high on his horse when he thought he had the right as a god to block Brent's root chakra in order to use me as a sex dummy in early 2022. But humble Jesus got that right rather quickly. I, too, suffered enough correction from my mother that I have remained humble for the most part most of my life. Yeah, Jesus and I have a lot in common. He was taunted as polio abs and I was taunted as polio legs. I got a little high on my horse in my 20s when I adopted the Victorian mindset, feeling I was better than others because of my superior sexual standards. I was a virgin when I married David Schuler. That was actually a form of overcompensation for feeling inferior all of my life. But marrying a pedophile and emotional abuser made me see the error of my ways, especially after I found glorious true love with Brent Spiner. Here's the key point. If the primary motivator for one's errors is fear and doubt, especially stemming out of a feeling of inferiority, that being stands a high chance of getting right if given enough inspiration and love. If the primary motivator for one's errors is pride, because that being has been doted upon for whatever reason, that being needs more than inspiration and love to get right. They need a good spanking, which will enable them to see the inspiration and love. When a spoiled brat or asshole is allowed to get away with all sorts of wickedness and not be punished for it, this contributes to their delinquency and even worsens their fear and doubt. You see, they see God as an incompetent nincompoop, simply because he allows the asshole to be an asshole. Satan thinks free will is stupid for this reason, and is why he thinks there's nothing wrong with brain control. Satan fails to understand that God the Father is just a long-suffering and loving Father, willing to give his children every chance, and who spanks his children out of love and doesn't want a multiverse of slaves. If God does have to permanently exterminate some beings, it is because he feels it a necessity to maintain the universe as a loving and wonderful place to exist. Jesus has a little bit more faith in those primarily afflicted with fear and doubt as compared to his Father, which may explain why Jesus feels some free lovers should be allowed into the righteous sector of the multiverse. Those free lovers primarily afflicted with fear and doubt will often get right if given enough inspiration and love. Those free lovers primarily afflicted with pride, like Satan, will need a good spanking, lake of fire, or hell before they get right. It is exceedingly difficult to practice free love without pride and/or fear and doubt. Therefore, we should have empathy for God's position that all who practice free love should be relegated to the wicked side of the multiverse. Even Jesus himself, about as righteous as you can get, when afflicted with some fear and doubt, practiced free love in evil when he used Gail as a sex dummy and violated Brent's root chakra in early 2022. Therefore, to maintain order and justice, God has outlawed free love in his righteous section of the multiverse. Jesus, however, wants to allow some free lovers into the righteous section of the multiverse, not wanting to force them to live with beings like Satan and live in hell if their main weaknesses revolve around fear and doubt and they don't have a problem with pride. That would be Brent, Jesus, and myself. Jesus does not seem to feel that all those afflicted with fear and doubt will always be afflicted with pride. You see, because Satan started off with just a fear and doubt free love violation, which ended up as a pride free love violation, God feels that all free lovers will end up like Satan. Pride and fear and doubt usually go hand in hand. Satan apparently did not have enough inspiration in his life to cause him to not devolve to pride. Also, he was the favorite and the spoiled brat, so to speak. Jesus wants his Father to give the more humble free lovers a chance. Jesus feels that given enough inspiration and love, a more humble free lover will get right. Jesus feels that not all free lovers have to be relegated to the Satan pride camp. Not all free lovers necessarily become proud. Given enough love and inspiration, which is the reason none of you should be donning those SJW labels, okay? Okay? Yeah, they're bad. Given enough love and inspiration, a more humble free lover can get right and practice their free love in righteousness and health. In fact, both God and Jesus probably believe Satan will get right too, once he learns humility and has some inspiration and love, however that will happen. Jesus, having overcome his minor fear and doubt, and fully understanding now the wisdom of his Father's ways, now wants to share what he has learned with the multiverse. He appears to want Brent and Gail working with Buddha to act as the righteous free love representatives and inspirations that he should have been. Sinful humans, Brent and Gail, have a tall order, but their strong and inspiring love for each other gives them monumental strength. Jesus is counting on this to get the righteous free love multiverse utopia that he wants. Though Jesus himself failed as a righteous free lover, his fear and doubt and identity crisis has been totally resolved, and he sees clearly why he failed. It was a fear and doubt issue, not a pride issue. A lot of it has been discussed in this treatise. Jesus wants to give the more humble free lovers a chance, not relegate all free lovers to the sinful pride camp. Not all free lovers have to become like Satan as God seems to think. Those free lovers who remain humble, who practice meditation to help resolve their fear and doubt, can practice free love in health and righteousness. Gail, Brent, and Buddha will lead the way. Jesus should remain a supreme deity. He has not failed as a supreme deity. He was a young God who doubted the goodness of his Father a bit, and those doubts have been overcome. Only an infallible being is qualified to be a supreme deity. The only infallible beings at this time are Jesus and God the Father. The Gail entities who want Jesus killed represent fear and doubt Gail, which is my past. Prime Gail, myself, is learning to overcome her fear and doubts. To have a multiverse run on fear and doubt would be an unthinkable abomination. God and Jesus only are qualified to be supreme deities. Jesus has lost his need to prove himself arising out of his fear and doubt, and realizes that losing this need, he never needed a wife in the first place. Therefore, free love should be given a chance for the righteous sector of the multiverse. Jesus is a totally aromantic and asexual being and never needed a wife. Therefore, he now chooses to let Gail and Brent be the righteous free love example that he originally intended for himself. As to why God has a wife who is Jesus' mother, and Jesus does not, who says two infallible supreme beings have to be exactly alike? Jesus, being the universe itself, finds contentment when his body, the multiverse, is healthy. If we all operate in health and righteousness, Jesus has his righteous, free and true love utopia. Jesus has his bliss. The multiverse is Jesus' wife. The multiverse is himself. Now I'm going to read a conversation that Jesus and I had on July 19th, 2015, which backs up everything I just said. Jesus speaking to Gail. Satan could have joined us in heaven if he hadn't been so rebellious and fell from heaven. He should have trusted us. He didn't think I knew what I was doing, but I always do. Nothing that happens in this world is by mistake or accident. I created it all, and the plan is finished. It will be carried out as I said. I really love Satan. I will always remember him as my most beautiful angel. Everyone can be redeemed, even Satan. I gave everyone free will for a reason. My hope is that all of my creation will someday find me again, no exceptions. Once they have suffered enough without me, they will realize the truth. But basically everyone can be redeemed, even Satan. The universe was built on unconditional love, not judgment. So even in hell, part of me is there. But a person has to be willing to find me. They have to look inside their souls, past the suffering on the outside, and know that they belong to me. That's all they have to do. It's sad how so many people want to make that part complicated. I love Zach Knight too. At this time, Zach was the Antichrist. He thinks I want to take everything away from him. The truth is, I don't care about a lot of the things he thinks I care about. If he wants to have sex with Rule 13 and include a hippo and a rhinoceros, good for him. I don't care about all the sex or all the exotic thrill-seeking he likes to do. At the end of the day, my will is pretty simple. It's so simple, Gail. Humans crave complexity, so I gave them this big Bible. Just take very good care of yourselves, that's the Gail Commandments, folks, and ask forgiveness. Love each other. Be thankful. There's your meditation. You're all a part of me, so get used to it. And stop acting like you're all separate. There's your meditation. Enjoy your bodies. That's your meditation and the Gail Commandments. I made them for you. I made you food, water, fresh, clean air, cool clothes, flowers, animals, sleep, everything. How many people do you think really appreciate all of that? Taking care of the environment is important. And each other. Yeah, that's why Zach shouldn't have tried to get rid of all the electrons. Your friends and even your enemies. I just want everyone to get along. You all need each other. Some Christians have a very us-them mentality. They think they are somehow superior by being more right than other Christians. It doesn't work that way. They just make the illusion of separation even worse. Yeah, we are all part of Jesus' body. Jesus is the multiverse himself, okay? It's like we're all cells in his body. Think of yourselves as extensions of me. When you fight, you're just fighting yourselves. When you judge or criticize another person, you're doing it to yourself. I sent the Nintendo CEO, Satoru Iwata, to heaven on a rainbow, Gail. I love Nintendo. He had a lot of love in his heart. He wasn't perfect by any means, none of you are, but he approached the world with loving motives. It wouldn't be very fair of me to make saying the actual sinner's prayer a requirement for heaven. There's no password to heaven. How silly. The prayer just invokes the emotions you need to feel in your heart to get there. But the sinner's prayer can be done in many other ways, including by living a loving and humble life. You have to live the prayer, not just say the words. So I said, the nice thing about the sinner's prayer is that it can cause your spirit to indwell us and empower us to better follow your plan. But in the end, you make the final decision, and we should all do our best to be loving and generous people. And Jesus said, you totally get me. Then I said, this makes me very happy to hear this. I believe my ancestors, the Oshu Fujiwara family, were very devout Buddhists and very loving. Did they go to heaven? They did not believe in war and even died for their belief, Jesus said. They all went to heaven. You'll love meeting them when you get here. Word on the street. Jesus is very cool with Buddhists. You can quote me on that. So, I said, this means that if a Buddhist is praying to his Buddha God with a sincere and loving heart, he doesn't know it, but he's actually praying to you. Boy, will he have a surprise in heaven. Jesus said, duh. Here's a secret. All these other gods people think they're praying to, it's actually all me. The trick is, if you feel love and inspiration and passion, that's me in your life. 1 Corinthians 13, I said. You're so perceptive, Jesus said. That means you like some of the New Agers then. Hell yeah, I like New Agers. They like to call me source and whatnot. So, even if they're worshiping something associated with Satan, it doesn't matter, as long as it makes them loving and great? Sure. Pagans are fine by me too if they are seeking love and harmony. It's when you start to feel bad, ill, disconnected, negative, hateful, you get the idea. This is why meditation works, folks. That's when you know you're off the path to me. But there's infinite ways to get to me, and there's no way they will all look the same. Well, in reading your word, if they disrespected your altar, they got in big trouble. But I noticed that those who disrespected your altar did so because they enjoyed being evil. Yeah, it's like the difference between a city mural and graffiti. Creation or destruction. The universe is only expanding. Life exists to cultivate more life. Through love, creativity, passion. When you humans do something opposite of that, it feels bad. Oh, so you wrote the laws and the 10 Commandments to ensure mankind would be creative but not destructive. Yes, but I gave you emotions and a conscience so that you could figure it out even if you never found the physical Bible. In fact, Buddha told me to quit reading the Bible because he said Baphomet was giving me too many messages there. Everyone can pray. It's a canceled book, by the way, folks. Everyone can pray, even if they think they don't know how. Prayer is listening for inspiration and love and finding the path that will lead you to it. That's really all it is. Some people think by praying that me or my dad will literally come down and talk to you. That's silly. If you go to a place where you feel gratitude and love, there's your meditation, folks, and it inspires you to act, you've prayed, and your prayer has been answered. We have to get in tune with that part of ourselves that is in harmony with you. When we do, we're on the right path. There you go. When we are in tune, we will feel peace and harmony within ourselves. It's a shame that Satan is using brain control to try and destroy this peace in many. Satan's problem is that he thought he knew better because of his big ego. His followers base their decisions on their own egos, which are governed by fear and doubt. There's no fear and doubt when you're with me. But what about resisting switch-out technology? Does this not require one to say the sinner's prayer? Being switched out with your Jesuit clone? Not really, but it's a quick trick that generally works. So, what is the best way to ensure that Jesuits cannot switch us out with our Jesuit clone, like what happened to Brent in the Quebec trial? Believe in me. The more pure your belief, the stronger you can resist. That's why you'll basically never be switched out, Gail. So Brent suffered switch out because he had serious doubts. Yeah, Brent was still agnostic, so he could be partially switched out. Now he's pretty cool. My biggest problem is lack of patience, but I remind myself that you have to do things in your time to honor love. Yeah, time seems so long and stretched out for mortals. It's hard, though, when you see so much suffering. But then I realize that without free will, there can be no love. We're suffering because we have free will. Exactly. Love is my favorite thing ever. If you guys choose love, you've chosen me.
In a world of secrets, where darkness reigns, there's a warrior rising.